Hi, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. This podcast of the People's Pharmacy is brought to you by Squatty Potty Toilet Stools. They create healthy toilet posture for fast, easy elimination. Learn more about toilet posture and health at squattypotty.com. That's SQUATTYPOTTY.com.
Life expectancy has increased dramatically over the last century, but chronic diseases undermine the quality of life. Are they inevitable? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Although Americans are living longer, they're faced with challenges such as arthritis, heart disease, diabetes, and dementia. Family members are overwhelmed with the demands generated by these chronic illnesses, not to mention the cost of care. Is there any way to reverse these conditions?
Dr. Jeffrey Bland is the father of functional medicine. His approach allows for personalized prevention and treatment of chronic illnesses. His most recent book is The Disease Delusion.
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, find out what you can do to enjoy good health both now and in the future.
First, this news.
In the People's Pharmacy Health Headlines. For decades, Americans have been warned to strictly limit the amount of saturated fat in their diets. Sat fat is found in butter, cheese, and meat, as well as coconut oil. The assumption has been that more sat fat on the plate translates pretty directly into more saturated fat floating around in the bloodstream, doing damage. A new study shows, however, that the assumption is wrong. Researchers recruited 16 people with metabolic syndrome. Over the course of more than 4 months, their diets were progressively changed with respect to the balance of fats and carbohydrates. Calories and protein were held constant at 2,500 calories and 130 grams. The diets were initially low in carbohydrate and high in saturated fat, and did not raise the amount of dangerous fat in the blood. As the proportion of carbohydrate increased, however, so did a marker called palmitoleic acid. This is an indicator that carbs are being stored as fat rather than burned as fuel. The authors believe it may make more sense to restrict carbs rather than fat.
We frequently refer to high-density lipoprotein as HDL, good cholesterol. But a study just published in the New England Journal of Medicine suggests that this is an oversimplification. Scientists measured cholesterol, HDL cholesterol level, HDL particle concentration, and a new marker called cholesterol efflux capacity in nearly 3,000 volunteers without heart disease. These people were followed up for more than 9 years. HDL cholesterol level did not predict heart attacks, strokes, stenting, or bypass surgery. Cholesterol efflux capacity, a measurement of the ability of HDL to carry cholesterol away from blood vessel linings to the liver, was much more useful. People with the greatest cholesterol efflux capacity were 67% less likely to suffer cardiovascular complications compared to those with the least. This may be an important new marker for heart disease risk.
Some people worry that running could be bad for their knees and bring on osteoarthritis due to overuse. Researchers decided to investigate that possibility. They collected knee x-rays, symptom assessments, and lifetime physical activity histories on 2,683 people in the Osteoarthritis Initiative study. More than half the volunteers were women, and the mean age was 64. After analyzing all the data, the scientists found that runners were less likely to be suffering from knee pain. It didn't matter what age they were when they ran. Regular running seemed to offer modest protection against osteoarthritis of the knee.
When people develop significant blockage in the arteries that feed the heart, doctors often put in a stent. In this procedure, a tiny balloon-tipped catheter is threaded through the artery into the narrow area. The balloon is inflated to open the artery. This expands a tiny mesh cylinder called a stent that continues to hold the artery open after the balloon is deflated and removed. Plain metal stents have a tendency to become clogged again after a period of time. That's why cardiologists have embraced stents that are coated with medication to prevent tissue regrowth inside the stent. The drawback of these drug-eluting stents is that they may trigger blood clots that can stop the flow of blood to that part of the heart. In other words, an induced heart attack. To prevent such blood clots, cardiologists prescribe anti-clotting drugs, but they haven't known how long patients should continue on such medication. A large new study attempted to resolve this thorny problem, since such drugs can produce serious side effects. Some patients were assigned to receive their anticoagulant for 30 months, while others were given a placebo anticoagulant instead. Continuing on dual therapy, anticoagulant plus aspirin, reduced the risk of clotting in the stent, but people were more prone to dangerous bleeding, so it did not save lives.
Another combination of medications that increases the risk of death from bleeding emerged from Denmark. People with the irregular heart rhythm called atrial fibrillation are at risk of a blood clot forming in the heart and causing a stroke in the brain. They're given anticoagulants to prevent this. Adding an NSAID pain reliever such as diclofenac or ibuprofen significantly increases the risk of serious bleeding. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. We're living longer than ever, but are we enjoying the extra years? Quantity without quality might not be desirable.
According to a new global survey, seniors in the United States take more medications and have more chronic illnesses than those in 10 other countries. The burden of chronic illnesses such as heart disease, diabetes, and Alzheimer's disease takes a terrible toll on patients and families. The cost to society is enormous. With the baby boomers aging, this silver tsunami could overwhelm our healthcare system. How can we overcome the causes of chronic disease?
To help us answer that question, we turn to Dr. Jeffrey Bland, biochemist and former research director at the Linus Pauling Institute. He's founder and president of the Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute and CEO of Kindex Therapeutics. His book is The Disease Delusion, Conquering the Causes of Chronic Illness for a Healthier, Longer, and Happier Life.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Bland.
Well, thank you. What a pleasure to be with you two today.
We are delighted to have you on the People's Pharmacy. Dr. Bland, for our listeners who may not know so much about your background, if you could just fill in, you are a biochemist by training, but you are also referred to as the father of functional medicine. What the heck is functional medicine?
Well, functional medicine is a word that, or a term that we really designed and kind of coined in the 1990s, early 1990s, to describe a form of medicine that was focused more on understanding the cause of a chronic illness rather than just its signs and symptoms and what you call it. So it's really focused on trying to find the origin of why an individual gets diabetes or heart disease or arthritis or dementia, and try to do something early about it by treating its cause rather than just ameliorating its symptoms with a drug after it's already been diagnosed.
Well, Dr. Bland, we know that you're a biochemist. You're known as a biochemist, and you have your PhD in organic chemistry. You also were the research director of the Linus Pauling Institute at one point. What was that like?
That was an unbelievable experience for me. I started my career as an academic. I was a professor at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington from 1970 to 83. And I took a sabbatical on invitation from Dr. Pauling and the then president of his institute, Dr. Emil Zuckerkandl, in 1981-82 to come and spend what was going to be a year, but it turned out to be 2 years, to oversee research at the Linus Pauling Institute of Science and Medicine in Palo Alto, California. And Dr. Pauling was my boss. His office was right next to mine as a two-time Nobel Prize winner, and I think he's still the only person to have won 2 Nobel Prizes individually and independently, one in chemistry and one in peace. He and his wife, Eva Helen, were just absolutely remarkable people, not only geniuses, but just the essence of what I would call citizens of the universe in all respects, social advocates involved with trying to reduce the essence of human suffering around the world. And It was really not only a scientific extraordinary experience for me, but it was a frame-shaping experience in terms of my recognition that I wanted to follow in the footsteps of the Paulings and do all I could to try to deliver something in the form of the work that we were engaged in to reduce the burden of chronic illness. And so when I came back from that sabbatical, I actually decided to give up my tenured faculty position and start a company that was to be focused on helping physicians to do preventive and later functional medicine in their practices.
We talk a lot about preventive medicine, but when you actually look at the statistics, they're not so great, especially when it comes to the chronic conditions that you're talking about. So the title of your book is called The Disease Delusion. What are you trying to communicate with that title?
Well, thank you. I think the title sounds a little bit like an oxymoron because we certainly know there are diseases, and why would we put the term delusion together with diseases? Well, yes, it is true that there are diseases. What is not so well understood, however, is that these diseases are not rooted in our genes as kind of inevitable hardwired legacies from our ancestors. I think there are a lot of people who feel that diabetes was in my family, so I'm going to get diabetes, or cancer was in my family, so I'm going to get cancer, or whatever the disease du jour is, if it was in my family, I'm going to get it. And that's been a dominant theme within medicine for really the last 30 or 40 years. Since the age of the human genome being deciphered in 2000, this model and concept has really changed dramatically because we now know that probably only between 25 and 30% of the origin of these chronic diseases that steal from us our health as we grow older are hardwired to our genes. 70 to 75% of their origin is how we treat these genes, our lifestyle, our environment, our diet, our activity patterns. These are variables that we can actually control. If they're personalized to our specific needs, our genes become our friends. They become strengths. They become warriors for us rather than risk factors for disease. And I think that's the extraordinary breakaway good news of the 21st century, is we're learning how to treat our genes with the respect that they deserve so that they will give us 100 years of good living and reduce the risk of disease throughout the course of a century of good living.
Now, it sounds a little bit as though you're talking about epigenetics.
Well, epigenetics is part of the story, most definitely. And, that is a very, very interesting kind of back to the future concept. As we all know, the term epigenetics has been around in biology for the better part of 100 years. And what it means, epi means above, so these are things that are above genetics, something that our genes then take the message from these higher order functions. And those higher order functions, the epigenetic messages, are often those that are created by the environment in which our genes are exposed. And so these are things that we actually have selections for. We can't change our genes specifically, but we can change the messages that our genes are receiving from how we treat them. Our sense of mood, mind, memory, behavior, diet, activity patterns, our workplace stress, our exposure to foreign chemicals and drugs. These are all things that individually influence how our genes are expressed into either health or disease. And the book is really trying to help people to understand we have now the benefit of this extraordinary new information as to how to personalize an approach based upon our needs so that we will get the good messages of our genes. I call these our bliss genes being expressed and our Greek tragedy genes being suppressed or silenced.
Dr. Bland, what common chronic illnesses could be delayed if we were to, make some real changes in our diet and our lifestyle?
The most important ones, I believe, that have the greatest impact upon healthcare right now are diabetes and its relationship to obesity and dementia, which, as we see, increasing dramatically. Both of those conditions are modifiable by personalizing the program correctly for the individual.
We'll get into the specifics of how to actually do that in a minute, but when you talk to modern medicine thought leaders, they sort of point to longevity as like the most important statistic. And they say, hey, look at how things have improved. We're doing great, even though we're sort of ranked fairly low in the world when it comes to longevity and other health measures. But it seems as if, there's this, we're living longer, but are we enjoying it less? It seems like older people are complaining about, oh, I've got high blood pressure, my arthritis is acting up, oh, my back hurts, oh, I've got headaches, I can't sleep. So this notion that we can measure how well we're doing as a healthcare system by longevity may be undermined by all these chronic conditions.
Well, Joe, I think that you just went right to the bottom line. That's really, I think, the most dominant message that comes out of the health research that's been done not only in the United States but globally, and that is that people are living longer, but they're not necessarily in their older years living healthier, and we call that the health span. So your lifespan may increase, but your health span may actually decrease. We now start seeing diseases that when I was in medical school back in the 1960s that were only really prevalent in older age people now starting to be seen in young people. The most dominant example of that, of course, is type 2 diabetes. I mean, when I was in medical school, that kind of diabetes was called adult onset diabetes because it only appeared in later age adults. So many adolescents were starting to have this kind of diabetes over the last 20 years that the term adult onset didn't appear appropriate, so they had to call it type 2 diabetes. And that begs the question, why are we seeing this epidemic of diabetes and its attendant effects? It injures the kidneys and the eyes and the nerves, and it's associated with dementia, and it's associated with heart disease. And it's also associated with obesity. Why are we seeing that? And people have said, well, it must be because we're eating too much and not exercising enough. Well, certainly that is part of the story. There's no question we're eating too much and probably not exercising and having the activity that we would really like. However, you cannot track the increased consumption of calories in our population and relate it statistically with the increase in prevalence of these diseases. The diseases are outstripping the increase in calories and lowered activity. There's something else going on. And that something else is really the forefront of what's going on in healthcare research right now, the breakthrough discoveries that have started to uncover the fact that it is certain things that we eat, certain things that we do and don't do that send messages to our genes beyond that of calories themselves that then signal our genes to express alarm. And alarm is seen in the presence of chronic illness, chronic pain, chronic depression, chronic fatigue, chronic sleep disturbances, chronic digestive difficulties. These are the origin of the chronic illnesses that later become diagnosed and are treated with multiple medications, but progressively get worse over time. So the question is, how do we recognize them early? What are their origins in that individual? And how do we turn this back the other way? Because these are reversible.
You're listening to Dr. Jeffrey Bland, biochemist and former research director at the Linus Pauling Institute. He's founder and president of the Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute and CEO of Kindex Therapeutics. His book is The Disease Delusion, Conquering the Causes of Chronic Illness for a Healthier, Longer, and Happier Life.
I love the idea of increasing our health span, not just our lifespan.
But we do need to learn how to treat our genes right.
We need to take a short break. When we come back, we'll find out what chronic illnesses are reversible and how. Dr. Bland will tell us about the assessment tools he uses to help people overcome their disease challenges and reach vibrant, good health.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
If you value the health information you get when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, consider subscribing to our email newsletter. You'll get the latest health news and information on upcoming podcasts delivered to your inbox twice a week. Look for the link at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions that deeply moisturize to make dry skin feel soft and smooth. The number's 800-345-7339, online at uttercream.com.
And by Squatty Potty Toilet Step Stools, creating healthy toilet posture for fast, easy elimination. More information about how toilet posture affects your health at squattypotty.com.
If you'd like to order a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show number 971. That number again, 800-732-2334. Online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today on the People's Pharmacy, we're talking about how we can overcome the roots of chronic illness and stay healthy for a long life. How can you reduce your risk of developing diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, or heart disease?
Our guest is Dr. Jeffrey Bland, biochemist and former research director at the Linus Pauling Institute. He's founder and president of the Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute. His book is The Disease Delusion: Conquering the Causes of Chronic Illness for a Healthier, Longer, and Happier Life.
Dr. Bland, I think a lot of people may be feeling startled by what you just said about some of these chronic illnesses being reversible. Do you have evidence for that?
Yes, Terry, thank you. This is, I think, one of the most exciting areas of biomedical research, and I'm very proud that our group over the last 10 or 12 years has been a small part in this. We've published over 100 studies in the peer-reviewed medical literature looking at what I guess we would call the reversibility of these chronic conditions by personalizing programs for the need of the individual. And the results are just truly dramatic. I mean, each one of these are a personal story. We have over 4,200 patient study experiences, so it's a fairly large group of people that we draw from. But each one is a life unto itself that has its own story, and each person has their own kind of like aha moment. People who I can recall a very high-profile engineer at Microsoft who, at a fairly young age, in his 40s, was already suffering from very severe fatigue, come home every night, couldn't participate with his kids and scouts like he wanted to, and the weekends was just having to sit down and kind of relax and rest, try to get ready for Monday morning, and he just thought this was a consequence of aging. His wife said, "No, hold it, you're only in your early 40s. What's going on? It can't be aging." They came as a participant in one of our research projects. After 12 weeks, his whole approach to life had changed. We had personalized a program for him. He was on several blood pressure medications that were causing an adverse side effect called impotence, which certainly wasn't good for his married life. He was off his medications. His blood pressure was normal. He was now in an activity program. He was participating with kids and scouts. His headaches and fatigue and general sense of lack of well-being was gone. I mean, it revolutionized his life. So that is just one of a myriad of kind of personal stories I could give you. But the aggregate data from all of this that we published in these controlled studies is that you can reduce the manifestations of what many people call age-related chronic illness, the chronic fatigue things, the chronic pain things, and sleep disturbances, things that we call sleep apnea. These are all reversible conditions. We had a guy come in who was on a CPAP machine, which is very common. These are the breathing assistant machines for people that have sleep apnea. They have to wear at night, and they're very uncomfortable. And after the course of about 10 weeks on this individualized program that was personalized to his need in terms of diet and lifestyle exercise program, completely free of his CPAP machine, no sleep apnea episodes at night. Many of the other symptoms that he had been complaining about, which were chronic digestive disorders and recurrent headaches, were gone. I mean, we're talking about, for him, breathing life back into his years of living. So these are things that are replicable from one person after another that are not related to taking a drug. I want to emphasize drugs often mask the symptoms. They're used to treat an endpoint. Could be blood pressure. It could be a symptom of pain, but they don't treat the cause. The cause is related to information that the genes are getting that are causing these bodies to have an alarm response. You reduce that adverse message to the genes, and the genes then go into their bliss state. They produce the right kind of messaging to the body, and the body feels it as, wow, I didn't think I was going to be this healthy again. And that's the nature of the new medicine, is how we deliver that effectively in terms of wellness medicine rather than disease care medicine.
All right, Dr. Bland, inquiring minds want to know. You described what happened with this Microsoft engineer, but you didn't tell us what was making him feel so rotten and how did you correct it?
Well, that's a very good question. So in his particular case, we found out that he had what we would call a glycemic response to his diet. And what that means is that after he was eating the food that he had selected to eat, his blood sugar levels were going up very dramatically, and then 2 to 3 hours after that, they would come down like the Andes Mountains. They would crash, and that very wide-ranging roller coaster effect of blood sugar is a result of changing hormones in the body that regulate blood sugar. Insulin, of course, is one. Another hormone is glucagon, and another is the stress hormone called cortisol, all of which are dramatically changing as a consequence of the way that he was eating. So we moved him over onto a different type of dietary regime. We call it the low glycemic load modified Mediterranean diet program, which is basically a type of food management plan that lowers the spikes in the blood sugar curve and normalizes these hormones, the insulin, glucagon, and cortisol, the stress hormone after eating. And when you do that in an appropriate way, and of course the person has to understand how to apply it, and that sometimes they need support from their partner for the appropriate menu planning and meal preparation. But if they're dedicated, as he and his wife were, to this program, the results are really quite dramatic and quite rapid. As I said, within 6 to 8 weeks, he was starting to get very, very significant improvement. By the end of 10 weeks, he was back on the track, and his medications had been virtually eliminated that he had been taking for the previous 6 years. So, again, I think it's looking at the individual and asking where are their unique issues that are related to their lifestyle, their diet, their environment, and then patterning the program for that specific need. And these are not very difficult. They don't require sophisticated testing often to be able to discern these answers.
Now, Jeff, I have to tell you that our listeners are very familiar with what you're talking about. We kind of preach that low glycemic load diet on a regular basis with a great many of our nutrition guests. And so everybody is nodding their head, we hope, and saying, well, yes, what Dr. Bland is saying makes total sense to us, but it's not always enough. So in other words, okay, diet is important, maybe fundamental, maybe the most important thing, but what about some of the other items on your agenda? And I'm assuming here that may have to do with how to exercise and what's the right kind of exercise, because people, well, should I be walking around the block? It should be 15 minutes. Should it be half an hour? How high should I get my heart rate? So what are the other pillars of good health when it comes to reducing these chronic conditions? Not just exercise, but supplements. Being involved with the Linus Pauling Institute, I assume, led you to have a whole new appreciation for nutrients.
Yes, thanks, Joe. That's absolutely right. And one of the things that when we formed the Institute for Functional Medicine in 1991, what I did, my wife and I did, was we hosted about 35 thought leaders that I was familiar with around the world that I thought were really doing some very extraordinary things in healthcare to come and share 3 days with us in Victoria, British Columbia, on Vancouver Island. We did this 2 years in a row in 1990-91. And out of that was born the concept of functional medicine, the Institute for Functional Medicine. And what we did during those 2-year meetings is we looked at the world's literature, medical literature, as it pertains to things like nutrients and exercise and stress patterns, and tried to ask the question, are there certain buckets that this information or these discoveries are falling into, so we could kind of simplify the literally thousands of research studies that were being published. And when we did that, we found that you could arrange these studies into 7 what we call core physiological processes. These include gastrointestinal function, they include detoxification, they include immune system function, they include cell signaling through hormones, they include what we call structural aspects of the way that bones, muscles, ligaments, and tendons are connected together to hold our structure of our body correct. They include certain aspects of neurological function. So we had these 7 what we call core physiological processes. And what we have found over the years, now it's 25 years later, is that you can look at an individual and start to understand where their health starts falling off the edge as a consequence of imbalances of one or more of these 7 core physiological processes. And not all people are the same. Obviously, any 2 people might have slightly different imbalances of their core physiological processes. So you want to focus your attention on that individual's needs. Where are their most likely problems that they've kind of stepped off the road and need to get back on the proper path? And that's where supplements and that's where personalization becomes very important. For instance, let's use gastrointestinal function as an example. We often think of our digestive system as being just something that breaks down our food into small bits that we can absorb and use the nutrients and get rid of the waste products. So it's kind of a piece of plumbing. But now there is a strong evidence indicating that actually the digestive system is much more than just a plumbing, a conduit for our digestion. It is also the seat of the body's immune system. More than 50% of our immune system is clustered around our intestinal tract. And therefore, it's constantly sampling the substances that are traveling through the intestinal tract, both our food, pollutants that we might have swallowed in beverages or food, and also the remnants of the bacteria that live in our gut. You probably all know that we have more bacterial cells in our gut than we have human cells in our whole body. And there are several thousand different forms of bacteria that live in our intestinal tract. They all have personalities, and some of them are not so good. Some of them are a little hostile, and they produce some bad stuff that can be absorbed and affects our immune system in an adverse way that causes alarm. So when we start looking at people that have kind of chronic digestive problems, or they have immune problems, they have chronic inflammation, we often think, well, gee, maybe there's a difficulty there with their digestive immune system. So that's where things like probiotics become important, and prebiotics, the selective food for friendly bacteria. That's where we start talking about what we call the 4R program, which is to remove the bad critters in our diet and the bad things that we're consuming. The second R is replaced by replacing digestive enzymes where necessary. The third R is called reinoculation, which is add back the friendly bugs, the probiotics and the prebiotics. And then the fourth R is recover, which is, or repair, which relates to specific nutrients, such as the amino acid glutamine, vitamin B5, pantothenic acid, essential fatty acids, omega-3 fats from fish oils. These are all nutrients that are known to help repair a damaged immune system of the intestinal lining. So when we put these concepts to work for us in these 7 core physiological processes, we're able to individualize programs. Some people might have problems with energy that relates to their what we call bioenergetics. And so we have certain nutrients that we know help tune up the energy powerhouse of the body called the mitochondria. So we use nutrients like coenzyme Q10 and N-acetylcysteine and vitamin E, the mineral zinc, carnitine. These are nutrients that can be very helpful for activating proper bioenergetics and replacing the energy powerhouse needs. So these conditions that I'm describing in the use of nutrients are not just kind of like a grab bag where you put your hand in and pull out a bunch of nutritional supplements. It really is focused on trying to fill the gaps of need within these imbalances, within these 7 core physiological processes. This might sound very sophisticated at first, but quite honestly, as they say, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a first step. And so starting down this path by just understanding the concept, it will open up all sorts of new doors for people to recover their health and to be on what I call a health promotion program than just a disease management program.
And I just want to mention for our listeners that if they are interested in where they stack up on those physiological processes, the disease delusion has a number of self-assessment tools in it.
Yeah, could you describe those self-assessment tools so that people would be better able to analyze and assess their own situation?
Yes, well, what I tried to do is to use the questionnaires that we've been developing over the last 25 years in our clinical research and clinical studies that are probing these imbalances within these 7 core physiological processes. So each of these core physiological processes that I was describing in summary has a specific questionnaire designed to help the person understand whether they might be a candidate for concern in that area. So there are 7 different questionnaires, each for of the 7 core physiological processes. Now, a person who goes through this and fills out the questionnaires, the majority of them probably they're going to say, well, I'm doing just fine. And these areas, I don't have any apparent problems from my responses to the questionnaires. But there may be 1 or 2 or 3 where they kind of show some evidence that those are the places where their imbalances reside. And then it gives an ability to laser in, focus in, start personalizing that program so that it becomes the program for the individual, not the program for the average. Medicine and health is for the real person. Statistical humans are of little interest, although in school we often study statistical humans.
Well, here are just a few of the questions. For example, do you feel that your health has gotten worse over the past 2 years? Have you lost or gained more than 10% of your body weight over the past 5 years? Do you have trouble going to sleep or staying asleep? Does pain in your joints or muscles limit your physical activity or mobility? Do you have problems with memory? Is there consistent ringing in your ears? How about over-the-counter medications? Do you commonly take anti-inflammatories, antacids, analgesics, sleeping remedies? Do you suffer from allergies? Just a few of the questions in the self-assessment program in the book. I do have one last question before the break. You mentioned digestive enzymes, and I think a lot of our listeners are going, what's he talking about? I mean, when I have indigestion or heartburn, I just go down to the pharmacy and I buy some Prilosec, Prevacid, or now I can buy Nexium 24-hour. Why should I think about digestive enzymes?
Well, another very good question, and I think that's a great example of the whole difference between the model that I'm describing, this 21st century view of medicine, and our past kind of approach, which is to uncouple the symptoms with the medication. And there's not at all speaking negatively to H2 blocking drugs or proton pump inhibitors, these marvelous drugs that help people who have had chronic serious indigestion to remove discomfort. But one has to ask, why did they end up in need of these medications? What's going on? And what's going on is an imbalance as it relates to the fundamental digestive process and its relationship to the immune system, which is clustered around our intestinal system. And if you can then treat the cause, which often is to improve digestion, so it's not just eliminating things out of our diet saying, I'm not going to have any more spicy foods. It's also improving your digestion and breaking some of these foreign substances down in our foods to friendly molecules. And that's what digestion does. Our digestive enzymes that come from our glands like our exocrine pancreas, these are digestive enzymes that break down protein and carbohydrate and fat. Often they've become worn out. We've overused them. They're not functioning as they should. So taking a supplementary digestive enzyme called pancreatin can often be the difference between a person needing a Nexium or a digestive blocking agent and not. It can be a person who starts to recover their normal digestive function without the pain and discomfort.
You're listening to Dr. Jeffrey Bland, biochemist and former research director at the Linus Pauling Institute. His book is The Disease Delusion, Conquering the Causes of Chronic Illness for a Healthier, Longer, and Happier Life.
It's time for us to take a short break. Coming up, Dr. Bland will tell us how he custom tailors a healing program for patients.
What about supplements? What role might they play? And which ones does Dr. Bland recommend?
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. Thanks for listening to this podcast of The People's Pharmacy. If you like it, why not rate or review it in the iTunes store? We'd appreciate it.
Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Squatty Potty Toilet Step Stools, creating healthy toilet posture for fast, easy elimination. More information about how toilet posture affects your health at squattypotty.com.
And by Redix Industries, makers of utterly smooth foot cream with shea butter, helping dry, cracked feet feel soft and smooth. The number's 800-345-7339, online at uttercream.com.
If you'd like to order a CD of today's show or any other People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 971. That number again, 800-732-2334, or find it online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today we're talking about how to reduce the risks of chronic illness by adopting the methods and principles of functional medicine. Is it possible to change the way our genes behave?
Our guest is Dr. Jeffrey Bland, biochemist and former research director at the Linus Pauling Institute. He's founder and president of the Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute and CEO of Kindex Therapeutics. His book is The Disease Delusion: Conquering the Causes of Chronic Illness for a Healthier, Longer, and Happier Life.
Dr. Bland, after someone has actually gone through and done the self-assessment and answered some of the questions, how would they begin to tailor a program that's just right for them, including dietary approaches, including exercise, including nutritional supplements that, will get things back in balance?
Well, Joe, I think there's two levels to that we've seen with people that we've worked with over the last nearly 30 years. The first is what I call the aha experience of just learning how to once again take charge of an individual's food and lifestyle. For many individuals, that I find is a revelation in its own right, because we've all become kind of creatures of habit, and we are consuming things and doing things as a process of habit. We're being marketed and sold things that often aren't in our best interest. We get into routines of kind of less than good habits, and then we tend to feel that we have no control over this, that this is all just our lot in life. So the first step is to introduce what I would call the base program, and we try to make that as simple as possible. Simple dietary changes. I call the 90%er questions, the things that can be done fairly simply. Let me give you one example. Give up high fructose corn syrup sweetened beverages and foods. That would be number one step, because when you do that, you actually have a variety of other positive benefits, because when you start reading labels and being sensitive to, oh, gee, that contains a lot of high fructose corn syrup sweetener, you'll find that it also contains a lot of other stuff that's not so good for you. So you're basically doing multiple things by just that one trigger. So basically giving up soft drinks and making sure that you're sensitive to these sweetened foods that are, giving way too much sugar. And number two would be watch the kind of fat that we're consuming as we're doing a dietary intake revision. We want to move more to the types of fats that remain liquid at room temperature. These are your polyunsaturated oils, particularly members of what I'm sure you've talked about many times, the omega-3 fats. We've been doing research actually since the 1980s on these what are called fish oils. They're not just fish oils, because the fish actually don't make these. They're made by algae and plants, and then the fish consume them in the oceans and concentrate them in their body. So we call them fish oils, but they're really plant oils that get concentrated into fish and other animals that eat those plants. So those oils have a very beneficial effect on supporting our immune system, lowering inflammation, reducing fats in our blood, and actually even lowering body weight. Surprisingly, it seems hard to believe that a fat could lower body weight, but they have a favorable effect on the way that our set point of our control of weight is regulated.
Now, Dr. Bland, I'm sorry to interrupt, but before you move on from the omega-3 fats, you're talking about taking those as a supplement, right? People don't actually use them to cook with.
No, that's exactly right. These are not cooking oils at all because of their ability to be damaged by heat and oxygen. We start with trying to improve the intake of these omega-3s from the diet, the fatty fish and your dark green vegetables, which contain more of the omega-3 oils. Flaxseed is a very good source of flaxseed oil. And then supplements can be added as well, the high-quality fish oil supplements. So,
and is there a baseline recommended dose of the supplements?
Yeah, I think the research that's come out around the world from a variety of very respectable investigators is something between 1 and 3 grams a day of a mixture of your omega-3 oils if you're taking a supplement. So for most people, these are in 1 gram capsules, so that would be 1 to 3 capsules a day is a good kind of benchmark starting amount.
Now, I'm going to ask what we would find in the Bland household when it comes to cooking oils. What do you use?
Well, I think it depends a little bit on what kind of cooking we're doing. If it's high-temperature cooking, we use olive oil because it's very resistant to injury from heat and oxygen. Or we might use even coconut oil, which is saturated, but it contains a lot of what are called medium-chain triglycerides that actually have beneficial effects on how our body produces energy. So, and it's also very heat stable and doesn't get injured by cooking. If we're cooking at lower temperature, then we might use oils that would be derived from various nut oils like macadamia nut oil, depending on flavors. And there's some culinary parts of oil that adds, as we know, that oils and fats extract out the flavorings in food and heightens our flavor sensitivity. So it depends a little bit on the culinary objectives that we're trying to get. But we would obviously stay away from cooking with the highly unsaturated oils like the fish oils.
What about avocado oil? What about almond oil? What about some of the other oils? I mean, we've been told for so long that saturated fat is terrible and that avocados are full of saturated fat. And so a lot of nutrition experts have said, oh, stay away from those avocados and stay away from that coconut. And it seems like we've done 180 degrees recently.
Yeah, I think that that was not well-founded suggestions to stay away from avocados or stay away from nut oils. Again, everything in balance. I think that's the theme that comes across from the studies that have been done over the years about nutrition. And you get some very, very favorable benefits from eating avocados other than just, the concern about saturated fat. There are, within avocados, monounsaturated fat, oleic acid, which I said is beneficial. There is a very high level of vitamin E. It's one of the richest foods in antioxidant vitamin E. It has all sorts of favorable nutritive benefits that are beyond any kind of concern a person might have about, it's a fatty vegetable. Similarly for nut oils, there are many, many beneficial effects of nut oils, and it depends a little bit on how it's processed. And I'm talking about minimally processed, cold pressed, not heat stripped and treated with caustic soda and so forth. So again, the method of production of these oils, just like we would say with sesame oil, as you probably know, that there are all sorts of grades, as there are with olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil has a very different effect on the body, much better effect than highly stripped, third pressing olive oil that has none of the various phytochemicals in it and doesn't have much flavor, and it's just basically chemical oil. So I think that, again, we have to be looking at as close to the original plan as possible, the better off for us.
Well, I did jump in and interrupt you, and I don't want to have short-circuited your description of the baseline program. So we shouldn't be drinking soda. I think that's not a surprise to anyone. We should be staying away from all the high fructose stuff. We should be careful about which oils and fats we are ingesting. What else belongs in the baseline program?
I think the third big dial for nutrition, which is a simple thing to remember and maybe is harder to apply, is the color of white in foods is not close to godliness. We want to stay away from too many white foods. What am I talking about? White starch, white sugar, white fat. These things that have been are very inexpensive ingredients that have been put into a lot of processed foods that certainly provide calories, but they don't provide a balanced nutrition. We know that, there's some people who say, carbohydrate is so bad for you. Well, carbohydrate is not bad for us at all if we eat it in the form that it was originally designed in nature, which is in the full fiber, full vitamin, mineral-rich form of minimally processed plants. That's where you get the best of carbohydrate, the whole grain products, and carries with it all the beneficial phytochemicals and all the beneficial fibers and nutrients, vitamins, and minerals. So staying away from white, which even includes too many potatoes. The principal vegetable that's consumed in the American public is French fries and ketchup. And so we need to recognize that that's not the kind of vegetables that we're talking about when we talk about phytochemically rich, beneficial plant products. We're talking about those that are minimally processed, can bring the natural colors and flavors with them. They're not synthetically flavored or colored. So you want to have green and blue and purple and red and orange and, eat the rainbow. It's a very, very important part of our dietary perception, dietary intake. So these are simple rules. Sometimes a little bit more hard to apply on eating on the run, because we say, well, gee whiz, at this fast food store, where am I going to find all this stuff that looks like it's minimally processed and carries all the natural phytochemicals? Well, maybe that's the first part of the story is we don't want to eat in those fast food places that often. They should be in moderation, if not minimized, and we should be replacing it with meals that look like they were once alive in the ground.
Jeff, you were director of the Nutritional Research Laboratory at the Linus Pauling Institute, and we think of the Linus Pauling and we think of the Institute, we think vitamin C, but it had a lot more to do with other nutrients as well. Can you give us a quick overview of, like, what do you take on a daily basis? What do you recommend to patients who come to see you? You know, what represents the most important daily supplements that we may be lacking from our diet?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, to make this simple, the use of a good multivitamin mineral of reasonable potency and good standard of quality, I think, is a good insurance policy. We don't know individually where our nutrient gaps might be. We all have individual genetic needs, and we also all have unique diet and food intake habits. And there are many studies done in the American public demonstrating what are called nutrient gaps, where they're not getting enough iron, or not getting enough zinc, or they're not getting enough of certain of the B vitamins, or folic acid may be a problem, particularly in women, because it not only helps with pregnancy and fetal development, but it also helps in hormone balancing in women and in prevention of certain types of hormone-related cancers. So I think that a good watchword is the consumption each day simply of a high-potency multivitamin mineral, which I've certainly been doing, and my kids and now their kids have been doing for our lives. And then secondly is looking at certain types of individual characteristics that we might have that demonstrate certain nutrient needs. For instance, if a person every winter starts getting cracks at the corners of their mouths, or their tongue starts getting furrowed, then it suggests that they have increased need for B vitamins. So you might then increase the potency of your B vitamin complex. If there is colds and flu, and it comes around and seems to hit you more often than other people, then you might want to use those immune supportive nutrients, which vitamin C is at the head of the list, and zinc is on that list, and the amino acid arginine. These are a few of the important nutrients. If you have a tendency towards high blood cholesterol, then you want to make sure you're increasing certain soluble fibers in your diet. You want to increase your vitamin C level. Again, niacin, vitamin B3 is important. It's part of your dietary approach, pyridoxine, vitamin B6. So it depends a little bit on your individual needs, but I would start with just a good high-potency multispectrum vitamin mineral.
It seems like we're facing an epidemic of autism as well as Alzheimer's disease at the two ends of the age spectrum. Is there anything we can do to reduce the risk of either autism or Alzheimer's disease as we get older?
Well, let me start with Alzheimer's, because I believe that's the one that's probably best understood now. I have a very good friend, Dr. Dale Bredninson, who's a neurology researcher and very internationally known for his work on Alzheimer's research. He's now head of the Alzheimer's Research Facility, a center at UCLA School of Medicine. And I think he, along with many of his colleagues, recognize that insulin resistance, what we call hyperinsulinemia, which means that a person can't control their blood insulin levels very well, is very strongly associated with Alzheimer's disease. And, I find this to be somewhat disheartening. My mother is still alive, nearly 90 years of age. I've dealt with her as she's grown older. Unfortunately, she's had very good health, and she's lived in a community living facility for the last several years with other people of the same age. And what I find is that many of these individuals are starting to lose their mentation. They're starting to lose their clarity of mind, their memories, and their personality starting to fade. And when I watch what they eat, they're eating huge amounts of sugar. They're eating multiple desserts. They're eating high glycemic foods that are, given out as a consequence of the meal tables at these facilities, these residence facilities. And it's like almost feeding the flame of Alzheimer's disease, because their blood sugar levels are going all over the place. Their insulin levels are going over the place. And all the work that we have seen done in neurosciences indicates that this is a a stimulant for breakdown of the hippocampal neurons in the brain that are associated with the progression of Alzheimer's. So I think Alzheimer's are things we can do, and the earlier the better, obviously, to control blood insulin and blood sugar through diet and lifestyle. Secondly, with the other side of the spectrum, you mentioned autism. I think that's a fascinating emerging story. Children that have sensitivities to certain types of foods that activate their immune system, gluten is one of those things, may then have increased, I don't want to call it production of autism, but have exacerbation of symptoms. And there's more and more evidence. In fact, some very, very good literature has been published in the pediatric neurology literature over the last couple of years, indicating again that certain food reactive materials and certain toxic minerals and toxic metals like mercury may in fact be very significant contributors to the exacerbation of autism symptoms and progression. So I think we're learning a lot that the brain is in connection with the environment, and by properly designing how that person's brain is exposed to the good things and prevent it from being exposed to the bad things, we can both limit, if not turn around, the clock on some of these extraordinarily injurious neurological problems.
Dr. Jeffrey Bland, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be with both of you, and your advocacy, Joe and Terry, to your listeners is going to really help make this change happen.
You've been listening to Dr. Jeffrey Bland, biochemist and former research director at the Linus Pauling Institute. He's founder and president of the Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute. His book is The Disease Delusion, Conquering the Causes of Chronic Illness for a Healthier, Longer, and Happier Life.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Al Wadarsky engineers the program. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Redx Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Extra Care 20 Cream, with 20% urea for extra skin protection. 800-345-7339, online at uttercream.com.
If you'd like to order a CD of today's show or any other People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 971. That number again, 800-732-2334. Or you can look for it online at peoplespharmacy.com when you visit our site. Check out prescription drugs, herbal medicines, and home remedies. Share your own experience and your thoughts on today's show. And do look for our Listen and Read offer, in which you can get a CD of the show and Dr. Bland's book.
At our site, you will also see an announcement we're very proud of. Kirkus Reviews named our daughter's book, The Word Exchange, one of the best books of 2014. That's The Word Exchange by Elena Graydon.
At our site, again, you can sign up for our free online newsletter or the free podcast of the show. You need never miss another People's Pharmacy program again. You can share it with a friend. It's all there at peoplespharmacy.com.
In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thanks for listening. Please join us again next week.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to the People's Pharmacy.